All right, folks. So you see this big mess in front of you right here? We are going to make a cool Team Yankee objective marker. Something custom, but something that's just really awesome, 3D, you know, rather than just a little cardboard thing on the tabletop. And we're going to use some creativity. We're going to use some awesome arts and craft skills. We're going to use a lot of stuff that's just lying around the house too, but also some things that are bought very commonly at any kind of arts and crafts store, hobby shop, whatever, to do it. And hopefully it's gonna come out and it's gonna look really cool when it's all done. And the one major expense here is going to be sacrificing a vehicle. And I'm going to use just an extra. So I have a BRDM-2. Now in the Soviet starter set, they give you 5. And if you look at, you know, your list building and your cards, it's odd because you have to take any form of BRDMs or spandrels or SA9s. They come in multiples of 2. So I'm not sure why they give you 5, because you can't take 3 of anything. There's no way to divide up all of them. So you could buy an extra box of 5, and then and then you get 10, right? And then you have multiples of 2. But I'm not going to do that because I don't really have use for it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to sacrifice the odd man out, and then I'll have 4, so I can divide that up as 2 and 2, you know, or a unit of 4, whatever, how I'm going to do it. And I'm going to use this BRDM-2, this little guy right here, and he's going to become my objective marker as a wounded, disabled vehicle that my Soviet forces need to reach and rescue in a game one day. And we're going to have a lot of fun doing it. So other items we're going to use, and this probably is not all-inclusive. We might reach out and get some more stuff. We're going to use some UV cure resin, and you'll see why later. We're going to use some HO scale trees. We're going to use, of course, hobby knife, drill, a little saw, some tin foil I've already cut out. So this is just cardboard from a box. Right, and I cut out already because it's just boring to watch me cut cardboard. I just sketched out a shape using the words are hard, BRDM in the middle of it, and then I cut out a centerpiece of it because what we're going to do is we're going to make some water that this guy is down in. And, you know, we're also going to use, a little mini hot glue gun that I have around here. I promise we'll find it in a second. And then we'll use some assorted paints and stuff, and of course a UV light to cure the resin as we go. I think it's going to be a fun little project, and it's the kind of thing that anybody with just minimal skills can produce, and then on your tabletop you'll have a really cool custom one-of-a-kind objective, you know, that you can play to. The tinfoil is crinkled on purpose, by the way. I did this because that's going to give some texture to the bottom of our water that we're going to use. So the first step, of course, is to get your cardboard. Now, I used a relatively, you know, a rigid, tough piece of cardboard. I wanted it to be something tough. I didn't want it to be too flimsy. So this is I want it to last. So I cut out the shape I was going to use, and then cut out my middle, and you'll notice I did it on an angle. So, you know, we have, when I glue around the edge with the hot glue gun so that the resin kind of can sit in there, I did that on purpose, and we'll see that later. Then I crinkled up the tin foil so that we have some texturing on the bottom there, and that's going to be the bottom of our little water feature here, and it's also going to be the bottom of our whole thing. And I'm going to use some glue to attach it, nothing fancy. A couple different glues that I use when doing my terrain and everything. This Elmer's Extreme is pretty good, and this Elmer's Pro Bond is pretty good too. This is a little, you know, they're about the same in terms of how I use it. I like the Pro Bond. It works pretty well, and it's not like a big fancy kind of glue or anything. It's not too expensive, but for doing this kind of terrain stuff, it works really, really well. And it's not as thick as the Elmer's Extreme, so when we're using it on stuff like this, it's just a little easier to work with. So the first thing I want to do is I'm just going to spread this all around to secure it nicely to the tin foil. Now, you could also do this with hot glue, I guess, but I have a very small hot glue gun. You could probably do this with, you know, other kinds of glue. It really doesn't matter. I'm going to just glue this to the center of the tin foil and hold it down a little bit. If you're really into it, you could use the hot glue gun to seal all around the edges here too. You don't need to do that, but it depends on how fancy you want to make this. I'm going to end up just trimming along the outside anyway. Now you want this glue to kind of dry and cure for a little bit. You want the tin foil on there really nicely. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a little bit of weight on this and just give it a little bit of time to dry and make sure this cardboard's really on here. So I'm going to cut the camera for a little bit as I put a little weight on here. I'll be back very shortly. I have the most wienerest ghetto hot glue gun in the world, but it gets the job done. So I'm going to fill in all of this cardboard area here with glue so that the resin doesn't leak out through the cardboard, through the corrugation here. And this is going to take me a little bit with this glue gun. This doesn't, by the way, this part doesn't need to look particularly pretty because the resin's going to kind of come up on it anyway. And we're going to do some painting and everything, which is going to sort of cover this all up. This is going to be like the bank of the pond, or the little whatever shell crater, whatever in your world this water is. Now at this point, if you just to make your life a little bit easier, if you want, you can trim through the foil. I'm not going to cut it completely, you know, around yet till we're done. But just so we don't have all this foil kind of in our face. There we go. So that's what we got right now. It's all sealed in where the resin's going to go. And next thing I want to work on before I do that is figuring out how this little vehicle is going to sit there. We could have it just, I mean, you could have it just sit in there. That's a little plain and boring. I want it to look like it's kind of sunk in there. It's stuck. I'm also going to do a little battle damage to it as well. So I'm thinking, you know, kind of in there, kind of in a diagonal way, which means I'm going to have to either sand or cut part of the vehicle down. So what I'm going to do is use some thin tape to kind of wrap around the vehicle and give me that contouring, that edge of where it's going to be. Sometimes I really overthink things, but in order to make sure I got the angle right of what I wanted, I made myself a little jig here, and I put it in there, and then I wrapped some tape around so I know the exact angle of where I'm cutting this. And now I can just take a little saw and I can start cutting down, and it's going to be a little bit of a project, but well, here goes nothing. So now I've just got to gently cut along this tape line. I'm going to go nice and slow to make sure I get it exactly right. So here is the cut down vehicle. It looks really rough, but it's okay because it's all going to be hidden in the resin pretty much. Once it's all done in there. It's going to be in distress, and it's going to be in need of rescue, and that is going to be the objective of this little guy right here. So the next part we need to do is we need to actually start painting and preparing for our water effect. So in order to set that off, I'm going to start with a very simple kind of just brown, tan, you know, surface. I'm going to start with some game color khaki as a base. And what I like to do when I'm doing this is I'll actually just I'll just mix colors as I go with no real rhyme or reason. I'll just kind of make it fit what I'm feeling, as I'm going along. So I might add a little bit of darker brown to it. I might add a little bit of green for kind of, you know, some algae and stuff. Really, it is all as I feel. And we got some more string there. But we'll want to make sure that we get kind of all of the hot glue. We're also going to be mixing, we're going to be doing a couple different layers of the resin too. The first one on the bottom is going to be just clear, and then we're going to mix in a little bit of blue towards the top. Give it a little bit of water type color. So there, I mean, there's going to be a lot of layers to this, and you don't have to do it that complicated. Like, you know, if you want to do a much easier version of this, if you're doing it, you can. It's all in how much work you feel like putting in. You can see now why I crumpled up the tin foil, because it really adds kind of a texture, sort of uneven base to the pond, the lake, the crater, whatever it is that we're saying our vehicle is stuck in. You know, otherwise it would just kind of be a flat surface, which wouldn't look very realistic towards, you know, being anything at all. So. All right, now to mix it up just a little bit so it's not just one flat color, I'm just going to put some drops of mahogany brown, like literally a drop, and that way we can, while the paint's still wet, we can blend it in a little. And also what I want to do is I'm going to get some Russian uniform green and sort of around the edges, get a different brush here. I'm going to add and you can also mix this in with the on the bottom too, mix it in with the brown a little bit for some different color, but you know, some algae kind of color. And any paint that gets on the actual cardboard surface, don't worry about that, because we're going to dress that up later too. And sort of blend it out into the bottom a little bit too, to string. Okay, Now, it doesn't look like much yet. It really doesn't. I get it. It doesn't, but we're going to let that dry for a little bit, and then we'll come back and start adding some more stuff. So once again, I'm gonna overachieve here and add some stuff that's really, you don't need to, but I'm going to. A little bit of talus and a little bit of ballast from Woodland Scenics, just standard, terrain stuff, just to flesh out the scene a little bit. Just gonna put this guy in the middle there, because that's where he's gonna sit, and I'm just gonna add some rocks, a couple, little things there, wherever they may go, and because I like to make these kind of things, I like to just add to them and really make them kind of a scene. So, in fact, I might put one of these rocks like right up against the vehicle, like it's really kind of messing with it. There we go. And then okay. You could even add, if you wanted to, like a little bit of grass or bushes or something to it. Just at the bottom. So now we're going to add the first little layer of resin. And this layer is, oops, got a little air bubble there. This layer is what's going to sort of get everything. We're going to pour slowly, we don't want bubbles. Now this layer, again, remember, clear. We're going to add a little bit of color to it in a second. But I want this to sort of, this is going to be the base that's going to hold everything else together. Might need to add just a little bit more. And, you know what I'll do just for kicks? Let's turn out a light. And we will start curing the first layer of this. And the way we did it, it has a very muddy looking base, so it looks like the vehicle is really sunk into the mud there, the way it's all cut up. And it's pretty effective. Now what we could have done also is we could have built up, could have actually used some mud, like, some AK Interactive or some, Vallejo or something, mud underneath the resin to really get it all caked in. But I think this works just as well the way we have it. What I was able to do with some of the excess resin there and a toothpick is put some splash marks on the side of the vehicle and some wet effects on the wheels, because they would be wet as it was driving through. So, and that's permanently on there now too, on the front. So it looks like it's in there and it's wet. So what we're going to do now is mix up a little bit of blue color to make this kind of watery, swampy. Sorry you didn't see the cup I was filling up there. And we'll just give it 1, 2. Oh, that's probably enough. That little squirt. You don't need a lot of dye, and adding too much dye can really affect the curing. And this looks really blue, but as it spreads out, it will it will get kind of squiggly. You'll see. So. And you'll see how the color will sort of separate a little bit. We might add a little bit more clear. So I put a little bit too much dye in there. And it looks like we're going to need to add a little bit more clear anyway, just to fill in. Because I want to fill it all the way to the top of where we put the top of our cardboard. So we are using a lot of resin for this project, but that's okay. And then we'll use the toothpick to swirl the blue. You know, the blue really helps us indicate in a game, hey, this is water. So, you know, again, not necessary to get into this level of detail, but if you're gonna make something, my thought always is, might as well make something, you know? So, I'm gonna go the extra mile here and make something. So we're gonna mix a little bit of the grass with a little bit of the resin here. And just sort of spread it out a little bit. There we go. And again, using this small light to cure it all. I mean, really, what we're making is kind of fun because it's not only, I mean, it's not only just this little objective thing we're making, it's like a little tiny mini diorama. It's telling the story of this lonesome little scout that got just schwacked in this little watery grave. How are we doing on the resin there? Are we good? Yep. So, and, you know, as I had mentioned, the blue is going to give it that little watery look, but in the UV light, the blue dye sort of tapers down a little bit. So we end up with seeing everything we had underneath and a little bit of blue tint to the water, but we still see that nice background that we provided for it. Let's work on just a little bit of damage to the vehicle itself, which is going to be really easy to do. Let's do this on the side that's easier to see, because that side is just not. And all we're going to do is we're going to make one little impact right about there. We can drill all the way through if we want. We might do two. And we got two holes of whatever caliber. I don't know, you know, honestly what that is in the scale of the game. It's a 0.8 millimeter drill bit. So an 80mm gun, maybe. I'm going to take just a little bit of NATO black. Just a drop. And we will make sure that those two entry holes there are darkened up, and put some little scorches around them. There we go. Easy enough. And I'm going to use a Tamiya weathering compact. Now the challenge here is going to be to use the soot in such a small little area to not do too much on such a small little model, but we definitely want to give a little bit of a burn look to it. Yeah, I think that about does it. That's all you got to do. And I mean, that's it. That's all we really need to do to give the illusion of a hit. At this point, we don't need this tinfoil around the edges anymore, so I am just going to trim that away. Now that we've got everything else basically done, all we've got to do is work on our surrounding area. And to start with that, I'm going to just give it a little bit of the same plain Jane brown paint job that we did for everything else. So we're going to start with just a tan, just to give the ground some cover color. Nothing, it doesn't need to be special at all. So I'm going to go right back into this khaki color, just to give it uniformity. And we'll kind of be careful of what we already did over here. And you don't, this doesn't need to be really perfect or fancy or whatever, because we're about to cover it up with some grass, and you add some trees and things like this. We're just, again, trying to give it a base color and give it some uniformity of color. Now, if you want to be fancy, you can do all the edges here as well, you know, just so it looks nice. But and this also helps the kind of grassy areas that we laid on there stand out nicely too. Another option for, you know, pure fanciness is to seal this edge with hot glue as well, or tape, or anything else. I'm leaving just the corrugated cardboard, because really, you know, how many people are going to be looking at it from the side edge once it's on the tabletop? The most I'm going to be doing is evening out the color that we're using for painting. I'm not too worried about anything else. Another option, again, how much work do you want to put into this, would be to lay some turned earth or something, make some tire tracks heading straight into there. If you really want to do the diorama full effect on this, just put, you know, take either the wheels that we cut off and lay tire tracks in with just a little bit of, you know, mud or whatever. You could even just lay on some brown paint or whatever and do that. I would probably do that after we do the grass and everything on there, and then put those tire tracks in. So we've got some of our extreme glue in a cup right here, just so we can get a good amount of it. And we'll pick where we're going to place our big rocks and get them glued on ahead of time, so that there's no problem with, you know, them sticking to the grass we put on later on, but not sticking to the actual surface. You know, minimize the chances of them falling off that way. I just want to put a little like rocky formation in there, so that, I don't know, it just has an interesting look to it. Yeah, there we go. Yeah, maybe we'll put a couple on the opposite side, and one right up against the water, and then right over there. not going too crazy, because we're also going to put some of these little trees on there as well, just to decorate it out. So I'm going to give this glue just a little bit of an opportunity to dry, and gonna get in this little corner area with a Q-tip just to get some of the excess. I'm going to water this glue down a little bit with just plain old water, just to ease its use in brushing around on the surface here, because it's very thick glue. So we can extend its life a little bit, and we can make it easier to work with if we add a little bit of water. It'll still hold what we need to hold. It will become much more workable. I want to put a paper towel down under it, because this is going to get a little bit messy as we mess with glue and grass. And I'm just going to work in small sections. Now, if I had one of those static grass applicators, that would be great. But we don't need to go for that kind of application here, because we might also have other, vehicles on the tabletop that drive up on. Now, who knows? So I'll just pour some on and give it a little help sticking down. There we go. That's all we're looking for right there. And I'll just work my way around the grass as I go, around the base with the grass. You really don't even need to be all that careful. You can overlap the grass you've already done. I'm just going to be really gentle around the edge of the water, is all. Put all that time into making a nice little water feature in the center of it. We don't want to ruin that. Now, if I had planned on this being actually handled more, I'd use some spray glue, or maybe even take a dropper and just drop some watered down glue around to make sure that grass holds on a little bit better. But right now, that's really all I need to do for it. What we could also do is take some, clump foliage. We could put some bushes in there too, which wouldn't look bad. I think that's maybe getting just a little bit more excessive than what we need on this right now. Again, as detailed as you want it. What I'm going to do though is I got these little trees on Amazon. They're way, I think, subscale for what we're doing here. They actually said they're 1/100th scale trees, and I have used them to make some other things. I don't know. They're a little small for my taste, but we're going to use them to kind of just dot around this little landscape. And since they don't have bases, this is a drill bit that is the perfect size. And since this is double, kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? It's corrugated, so it's got, two pieces of cardboard here. It's really easy to drill through the first, for instance. So we'll put a tree right here, and just gently drill through the first layer of cardboard, and we won't go through the second layer. We'll just leave it right there. And then we can put a dab of glue onto this tree, put it right through the hole, and it stays pretty nicely. So we'll just take our tree and fit it in that little hole that we made right there. And we've got a tree, and then we can measure another one, kind of right next to it. See where that's gonna fit. Right about there. And again, just gently so we don't go through that second layer of cardboard on the bottom. And fit that tree in. And, you know, we'll put a couple trees in there. And I'll fit a few trees throughout this, you know, just randomly to give it a little bit more 3D oomph as we finish it off. Changed my mind about the bushes, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to kind of roll them around in the watered down glue solution, and that will help them just stick really nicely to the ground we already have over there. And this stuff, it'll dry nice and clear, so as long as it gets on the base, it will dry clear. You won't see the glue on there. And just mixing up a lighter green and a darker green so it doesn't just look like one monotone kind of blob. I'll clean that off the water with a wet Q-tip real quick, and once I get this in place here around that tree, and we'll just get that glue off real easily like it was never there. Okay, and maybe we'll put a little bit over there too, since we've got some glue left and we've got some little bushes left. Glued in place. There we go. Just add, you know, just a little bit more. We'll put some right along the water. The very last thing I'm going to add is a little bit of turned dirt. And this is used to make some mud splashes, but it's relatively thick, and so what we can do is we can use this to make some tire tracks going into the dirt there. Sorry, into the water there. I'm just looking for a nice brush to use to do this. And then, like I said, we'll use another BRDM to actually emboss some tracks. Just to give one more little added sense of realism, I sprinkled a little bit more watered down glue and put a little bit more grass on it, just very lightly, so that we can put some grassy tracks in there, because we don't want it to just be muddy streaks through the woods. We want it to be tracks. So not all the grass would be gone, just some, with kind of these deep pits in the middle. There we go. Leaving a little bit of the grass to the sides. So I think that works nicely for our tire tracks. Now everything here needs to dry just a little bit with the glue and stuff. Generally, this little project is done, and it's been a lot of fun to do. It's, you know, part scale model, it's part game piece, so I can use this now as my little rescue objective. You know, and it can be an objective for either side in the game. It can be the Americans need to get there and capture this. It can be my Soviet forces need to get there and rescue this. Or, you know what, we can just have it be a really cool piece of scenery in the game. It can just sit and be a centerpiece, you know, or a piece of terrain that in the middle of the table that nobody can get past, or something like that. It was just a lot of fun to make, though. It's good practice for terrain making skills, good practice for using a lot of the different elements that went into it. Good use of this extra piece, this extra vehicle that came in the starter set, you know, it just the cards and the list maker on yankeeforces.com or .net or .egg, .hillbilly whatever it is, that it doesn't let you really use. It was just, I think it was a lot of fun to do. And very simple, too. If you haven't really made your own kind of terrain pieces, or you've never made a little diorama or anything, very, very easy to do with very simple supplies and tools and techniques. Got our 2 little entry holes burned out there. So, I don't know. I hope maybe some folks found this a little entertaining, a little educational on how to do stuff like this. Maybe gave some folks some ideas on what they might do on their tables with their stuff, their pieces. I just, you could also just put it on a shelf and be like, hey, here's my little tiny diorama scene. You could do it with and this translates. If you could do this with a little tiny 1/100th scale model, you could do this with a full scale, a 1/35th scale model too. I did this in, it wasn't a 1, 2, 3, it wasn't a 5-minute craft. There's a lot of time waiting for certain parts to dry, and there's some production time, in making things happen. But this is a 1 day project. It's a few hours and it's done, and you can put as much or as little time into it with the details as you want. So I'm pretty happy with the way it turned out, though, and now it'll go on the shelf with the rest of the Team Yankee stuff until the tabletop is ready for it. So, comments, suggestions, criticisms, feel free. Let me know. If you guys have other ideas for interesting things to throw on the table like this, share with the group. But anyway, for all you guys doing your own building at home, as always, of course, keep building them, build them well. And I will be back soon with more cool stuff. See you then.